Good evening and welcome to Gunnershot and Casa. Today we're going to talk on what makes Israel fight and what makes Israel actually fight on. And to discuss this topic, I have with me a very, very learned and erudite panel. First, let me welcome the panel. Sirs, good evening to you and good morning to you, Colonel Peter Lerner from New York. Welcome to Gunnershot. Before I proceed further, I request General Gautam Moorthy. Sir, please do the honors. All yours.
Thank you very much, General Shankar. Welcome to all the panelists. Welcome to all the participants on this very important webinar on this hugely important day where the Middle East, what we call West Asia, is in great turmoil. I'll just say a few words about our panelists here, although some of them need no introduction. General HASNAIN, one of our most erudite scholars, very well decorated officer of ours, who, as I told you, he's commanded 15 Corps. He was a military secretary. He has served in UN missions abroad. And he is Secretary of the Government of India, member of NDMA. And very welcome, sir, to this webinar. We're so happy to have you over here again.
Thank you.
Next, General Mr. ANIL TRIGUNAYAT of the Indian Foreign Service. He has served in Indian missions abroad, been a Deputy Chief of Mission in the rank of Ambassador at the Embassy of India. He has also served as Ambassador to Jordan and Libya and is an expert on the Middle East and West Asia. And above all, I would like to introduce our special guest today, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner from Israel. Welcome to Casa and Gunnershot, Colonel Lerner. Colonel Lerner served 25 years in the Israel Defense Force. He's been in the forefront of crisis, controversy, and conflict. He is an expert in regional affairs, media issues, and Israel's national security. He is acutely aware of the challenges that face Israel. Prior to retirement, he was Israel's Defense Forces spokesperson for foreign media. And I would like to share with you what Newsweek commented, that Peter has the worst media job in the world, but is a breath of fresh air, bringing new clarity and professionalism to military relations with the media. That's a huge compliment. The British Sunday Express called Peter Israel's other Iron Dome. So welcome to Casa and Gunnershot, Peter, and we look forward to some very important insights from you. Our moderator for this evening is none other than our General Shankar. He requires no introduction. He runs this channel Gunnershot, on which we are. And thank you very much. His average all-time readership is recorded and viewership over 5 million, and he gets more than 2,000 to 3,000 hits per day. General Shankar, over to you. Thank you very much for hosting this and looking forward to a very interesting discussion. Over to you, General Shankar.
Thanks a lot, sir. Good evening, gentlemen. And it's an honor to be erudite panel and learned panel of General Gautam Moorthy, Ambassador TRIGUNAYAT, General HASNAIN, and Colonel Peter. We're looking forward to a informed discussion on the West Asian crisis, right? And this crisis started about 9 months back. And if you really look at it, there are many subtexts to this entire crisis as it has unfolded. And all these are today live, right? If I look at it, look at the subtexts which are there. It started with the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza, with a gruesome attack, terrorist attack by the Hamas on, peaceful Israelis. And then, of course, that conflict has gone on. Then, of course, the conflict has expanded. It has taken in Israel, it has taken in Hamas, and Israel versus Hamas, Israel versus Hezbollah, Israel versus Houthis, Iran, and now Turkey is also trying to get into the whole story. There have been Red Sea attacks by Houthis. on the shippings in the Red Sea and Bab al Mandeb, and then piracy has returned, right? And the Somalian pirates or whoever it is are active. So a whole lot of unrest in North Arabian Sea, Red Sea, and of course the Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz and the Bab al Mandeb are under threat. So is the Suez Canal. International trade has been affected. And there's a great threat going on to international trade, which affects probably everyone. In the midst of all this, we've had two deals also. The Hamas Palestinian Authority deal, which was just concluded about 2 weeks back, and we don't know what the future of that is. Then, of course, precursor to all this has been the Saudi and Iran peace deal. A whole lot of things happening. And I have not mentioned the IMEC and the Indian interests and all that, which we've been discussing on and off. Okay. Now, while everything was going not so fine, going along, the conflict was bumping along, a couple of things happened. And these things happened in the past 2 weeks. If all of us know about it, I'm going to talk of it. The first thing which happened, look, as the conflict in Gaza continued, you had this Israeli airstrike on Houthis Odaidah port, which is pretty significant and a very well planned strike. And this was in retaliation to the Houthi strike into Israel, a missile strike, right? So that upped the ante a little bit. Then it was followed later by killing of the Hezbollah commander in Lebanon and a strike into Lebanon. So, and of course, the conflict between Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Hezbollah has also been bumping up. And of course, yesterday we had this where Ismail Haniyeh, the commander of Hamas, has been killed in Tehran. So things have come to a head. And in my own way, and I have no doubt that all of us will agree to this, that the killing of Ismail Haniyeh is a great bump in this entire conflict, and it's going to have a lot of consequences. Right. So this is the issue. What makes Israel fight on? What will it take to Israel to continue fighting? And where is this entire conflict heading? That's the open-ended question which I'm going to throw at all of you. So what we'll do is I'll give 10 minutes to each of you to give your assessment of the whole situation and where it's going forward. And then from whatever you've spoken, I'll take a question and throw it back to you. Right? And we'll start with General Gautam Moorthy, follow it up with Ambassador TRIGUNAYAT, then General HASNAIN, and I'll give the last call to Peter. Right? I'm going to give about 10 minutes each, give or take a minute over here and there. So with this, General Gautam Moorthy, sir, I welcome you. Your opening salvo, please.
Thank you very much. Welcome to everyone. The past 3 days have been a watershed, really, an inflection point, not only in the ongoing Israel-Hamas war, which has crossed a 300-day mark a few days ago, but in the hottest spot on the globe, which is West Asia, that we call the Middle East. General Shankar has wonderfully covered that. But 3 events that have taken place on 3 completely different fronts in just a short while, with the last overshadowing the other 2. This has ratcheted up tensions like never before. The first is this recent event was this airstrike in southern Beirut day before, where the senior Hezbollah leader and advisor to Hassan Nasrallah, Fawad Shukr, also known as Al-Hajj Mohsen, was targeted and killed as per the IDF, which held him responsible for the killing of the 12 Druze children in a rocket attack in the village of Majdal Shams on the Israeli side of the Golan Heights. Now, these children were, some people refer to it as the Israeli occupied Golan Heights, but they were actually within Israel and well within Israel. This missile or rocket or drone, still not clear, has gone and killed these 12 children who were in a football field. Now, this was something that Israel said that we will hit back, and they have hit back. The second is something internal and very deeply worrisome for the internal security of Israel. Since this webinar is what makes Israel fight on with the recent events, there is a recent event that we must all know about, which has really shocked the conscience of many Israelis. I'm not even talking about others. Dozens of Israeli protesters, which included far-right members of the Knesset, have clashed with military police after 9 soldiers suspected of abusing a Palestinian prisoner were detailed for questioning from a detention facility in southern Israel. These protesters then went into the central Israel to IDF's Bet Lid base, and this has deepened the divide in Israel between the right and the left, leaving the country deeply polarized. The chief of army staff called it borderline anarchy. Now, you will recollect before October 7th, for almost 8 to 9 months, there were huge protests in Israel about against Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Israeli society was deeply polarized. October the 7th somewhat got them together, but we have been receiving reports that the far right soldiers of the IDF are being a law unto themselves. They have been roundly criticized by the hierarchy, but I'm afraid there are certain instances where the soldiers have not even taken orders properly. It's all over the net that we are reading. To add to Israel's woes, we are aware of the about 115 hostages still believed to be held by Hamas. There's tremendous pressure on the government by the friends and relatives of these hostages. Calls are mounting on Netanyahu to resign. He is being painted as a villain, not only by the Arab nations, but also by many Israelis. Now, this is a front that we need to take into consideration. The third development, of course, is this targeted killing of the Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh by Israel in Tehran, which is less than 24 hours ago. And this is in Tehran. This by far will have very serious repercussions, which would draw Iran into the war as it's seen its sovereignty violated openly by Israel. That too in killing of a VVIP guest who was invited by the Iranian leadership for the swearing-in ceremony of the new president. This is being seen as Iran as an insult to Iran, which has promised to strike back. And I'm quoting what the Iranian president has said, that terrorist invaders will regret their cowardly act. So what does the future hold? Where do we go from here? This has really taken it up to the highest levels. What happens in the immediate time frame? What happens in the mid-term? What happens in the long term? And what is it that is making Israel fight on despite the kind of problems it is seeing from within Israel? So this killing could have the implications. Of course, there'll be an escalation of conflict, with the Hezbollah also getting involved in such a major way. Huge political ramifications. The regional tensions are at the highest. And what happens to the ceasefire agreement? I really don't know, because the ceasefire agreement, as of now, I can say is truly buried. But let us see if it comes up, because Haniyeh was one of the ones he was actually leading this ceasefire agreement. What are the broader geopolitical landscape? And the US, which has been backing Israel, is already under a lot of strain and stress with the presidential elections coming up. So I really don't know where this is going to lead, but we are in for a very, very troubled times ahead, and this war could expand. That's all I have to say in my opening remarks. Back to you, General Shankar.
Thanks a lot, sir. I think you made a couple of very important points. The first point is, we are looking at a pretty divided Israel. They say in Israel there are too many parties for such a small country, and across the spectrum there is internal rift. But at the same time, over the past 9 months, notwithstanding whatever the internal rifts are, Israel has, put up a clear front, a united front in its military dealings. So, how will Israel, with a divided polity but a united military, go ahead? Will the divided polity, impact the military? Is something interesting we have to see. The second thing, of course, is a no-brainer. Is this what will be the trajectory of the conflict between Israel and Iran will take? And I will not, it's no second guessing that Houthis and everyone else will jump into the thing and the larger impact on this area that we'll discuss. So that was very nice. With this, I'd request Ambassador Trigunayat, sir, your views on this whole story. All yours.
Thank you, sir. Shankar, it's an honor to be part of this esteemed and panel of very distinguished experts. Well, we all know the basic details that have been very clearly brought out by you and General Moorthy. We are really at a major crossroad here in the region. This is what happened about Ismail Haniyeh. One has to look at various things. One is the location where it was done, the context, how it was done, like when the swearing in was taking after that, immediately after that. And thirdly, one has to see about the repercussions of this. Knowing too well the kind of history that history of enmity that Israel and Iran enjoy for the last since 49. So what we are looking at today is, but since our topic was in the first place what is driving Netanyahu with this war, why Israel, if you put it, then it is the longer term. Why Israel? That's very simple. For its own existence, with great difficulty, they achieved their state in 1948. But since then, what has happened on the ground after those three major wars, with the 1967 war being the most decisive, when Israel occupied really all the major places in the region and eventually gave it slowly, ceding the territories. But within the West Bank, it has continued to expand the territory through settlements, and now today thousands of people are settled there. And this also, the last October 7 attack that happened was also that areas, kibbutz. Now what we are seeing today is that since October 7 till now, the war has continued to escalate. Now, what happened? What was Hamas's objectives? We need to see that in a bit of a clear this thing, because you know that in the Arab world, the appetite for the Palestinian cause was virtually dying down. We have seen the Abraham Accords, and we were seeing that Saudis were more than anxious to normalize ties with Israel at the time. And so therefore, Hamas thought that in case Saudi Arabia also recognizes Israel and normalizes the ties, the last bastion of support, at least the moral support, Islamic support, will end there. So therefore, that was one of the major drivers, in my view, for them to decelerate the normalization process of ties between Israel and the Israel and the Saudi Arabia, as well as to put on hold several other projects that were undertaken, whether in a sub-regional format like the I2U2 or the IMAC and others, which are now currently on the back burner. Thirdly, it was able to also recharge the Arab Street, not only within the Arab countries where very often we did not see the protests that much, but even in the European countries, USA, everywhere, the students and others, we are seeing that the Arab lobbies have come of age, and they are giving quite a run to the Jewish lobbies, especially in the United States. So that is the major change that had happened. Thirdly, they were able to also unwittingly bust the invincibility of the Mossad, the IDF, and the Shin Bet, when the Hamas was able to come down to about 30 kilometers, kill so many people, and took about 250 hostages. It was an unprecedented move that has ever happened. So it was a terror attack. The world has all condemned it, and they tried to gain some kind of a political legitimacy, as I would say, the popularity of Abbas and the Fatah and the Palestinian Authority has been significantly reducing. So this was something they wanted to take all the things in their hand and to become a legitimate political force. Now, naturally, the Israel had to react. They were in a shock. They did not expect that this would happen. They were more focusing on the West Bank and on in the wrong manner, basically on various settlements and trying to arm them. But they did not expect that this will happen. So this was a clear failure of the intelligence, even though they got some tips from Egypt and others. So immediately Netanyahu, the hawkish leader that he said that we must destroy Hamas. Nobody would have argued with that. Had they taken what they are doing now, if they are doing it, they have not admitted to this Ismail Haniyeh's killing, but so they have not done to many. There are books written on these about Mossad operations, but this is something that has redeemed the intelligence operations. One always knows, as far as Hamas or Gaza is concerned, that Israeli intelligence services have almost every inch of the territories mapped out completely through their intelligence. So if they wanted to take that mode of killing all the leadership of the Hamas at the time, they could have done it and could have spared a lot of innocent civilian lives. About 40,000 of them have been killed. And in the process, Israel has also suffered a great deal. It's not the first time, because the most powerful army in the region is today about 9 months on and is not able to be victorious in this and is still talking to Hamas that he lives on. The Israel IDF's chief himself mentioned that it is not possible to defeat Hamas because it has become an ideology. Even if these leaders are killed, there are others who are coming out. So it's not going that way. Then some say that it was also a pretext to regain Gaza. We'll have to see that. And this also exposed the Arab unity facade. So that is something they wanted to explore, whether they are going to come back all. So Arab countries have not acquitted themselves. It's only very recently that Saudi Arabia has started talking. But the two major benefactors and supporters of Palestinian cause overall came out to be Iran and Turkey in this whole process, and not the Arab world per se. And Iran has this very peculiar strategic ambivalence as far as this 3H or 4H axis of resistance is concerned. Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And one, if you follow basically the Hamas trajectory, you know that this is not the most primary thing for Iranian experts or the IRGC experts. It is the Hezbollah, which is their real army that is there, that can be unleashed, and that has very big power to contend with. And we have seen it growing, and everybody admits to that also. But Hamas is definitely, they are very much supporting. They are supporting the cause, they are supporting them militarily, and everybody has talked about it also. Houthis, on the other hand, have also held back the Saudis and everyone else, and we have seen how since 2015, they have also emerged stronger in the way that they have taken the whole maritime trade as hostage, basically. They were able to attack Israel, and even the Eilat port, which is one of the major Red Sea ports, has declared insolvency recently. So this is something that is happening now. Israel's biggest supporter in the world remains the United States of America. And Mr. Netanyahu was there just last week. He met President Biden, Kamala Harris, and Trump. All three of them has been urging him basically to go in for ceasefire. He had two basic proposals, like some foreign forces, some kind of a foreign control over it, because he doesn't want to give Gaza back to either the, as he called, Hamastan or the Fatistan, either the Palestinian Authority or this. So he wanted this, the security of this must be kept under his charge. Thirdly, the very personal thing that one has to see about, and you cannot dispense with it. Netanyahu, basically, in my view, has been riding a lion. It is that if you come down off the lion will eat you up. You know, he had these discredited, because this has happened under him, under his charge, that the Hamas was able to carry out those terrorist attacks. So obviously that is very much responsibility. Whenever the commission will be set up, they all will be accountable and they will be removed, essentially. Shin Bet leader has already resigned from there. So his own political survival depends on as long as this war lasts. That's also a theory. And that has a logic to it. We have seen when things were, he was being pressured too much, he carried out the attacks at the Israeli consulate in Damascus. That is also a sovereign territory whenever you do that. So it was willingly done. This time what is being done is killing somebody in Tehran itself. I mean, that is directly, so this is something that Iran, which has been restrained to some extent, or was not doing anything openly, but trying to do that. And they did this facade in April when they both exchanged volleys of various drones and missiles attack. That was for the show. Everybody knows it. They just want to test the capabilities and show the capabilities. But today it is a very different thing. The new leader has taken over in Iran, and people were there for his swearing in ceremony. And at that time, this person being taken out, and if it is indeed done by the Israelis, which they have not so far accepted or admitted to, then obviously we are looking at a very, very major escalation. Because Iran at this time cannot, though may not want to escalate the war, but cannot refrain from doing so. So we are looking for some kind of a major escalation. Now, it may not directly do so. This time, it will activate Hezbollah. Hamas will continue to fight now. The fate of the hostages will be basically, one does not know what will happen to them. Whether they will remain alive or they will be executed, what will happen? You don't know as a result of the kind of revenge that these Hamas militant groups will take. On the other hand, the Houthis will also, all of them who are also present here, have conveyed their greatest support, the condemnation of this thing. So what we are looking at is, unless, and today in the region, there's no mechanism whereby they can control Iran or tell Iran to go down. It is only if there is some indirect discussions going on with the United States. Blinken is in the region, he's in Singapore. He just said that America did not know about it. Now that is something that one doesn't know. So US has been put on the mat in this one. I have always maintained that in this war, the biggest loser is the United States. So I'll stop here and I'll be very happy to answer questions.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed a lot of points which you brought out. The first major point which you brought out, I think, which all of us need, I mean, we all knew it, but I want to reiterate it, is that we are looking at a conflict between a very powerful army, that is Israel, was a very powerful ideology which Hamas represents. And the biggest problem of this war is how do you reconcile the two? One can't defeat the other. And that means that this war has to, it doesn't see an end. After all, there's no political end game or a common, platform on which they can get down to. The next thing is Netanyahu is riding a lion. He has to ride the lion, and if he gets down, it'll be eaten up. So one way or the other, there's going to be a problem. And he doesn't want to get eaten up, so he'll continue with this problem, and the escalation is going to go ahead. The third point, I think, which you made very important, is there's no mechanism to control Israel. And USA is not in a position to control, not Israel, sorry. There's no mechanism to control Iran. And in the absence of such a mechanism, and with USA not having the leverage to impose any kind of restrictions on Iran, it's an open question. Where does it leave Russia and China in this whole game? And we'll talk about this. And this is a question which I'd like your views on. And of course, I'll not, go further. We'll take up the issues as they come along. With this, General HASNAIN, sir, all yours.
Sir,
can't hear
you're
you.
muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
So sorry, I had muted myself because
No, that's okay, sir.
Here. Thank you very much for the invitation, first of all, to participate in this great theme, on this great theme, and also along with such great personalities. I'll try and keep myself restricted as much as possible. Let me start with an observation. A bit of research this afternoon tells me that in a particular poll, 59% of the people in Gaza still feel that Hamas should rule. 59% of those polled. 70% seem to be satisfied with Hamas's role in the war. So it seems, and these polls can all be sham polls, they can be all kinds of things, so you cannot take this information as authentic, but this is an indicator I'm just giving you that despite everything which is happening, the kind of casualties that the Palestinians have taken, it seems that the Hamas support to Hamas remains intact. Let me tweak the subject a little bit. What makes Israel fight on? And I won't ask the question, I'll just say fight on effectively or not effectively. You can keep on fighting. But If you are not effective, it's not going to be of any consequence, right? You can fight this war for the better part of the next 3 years, kill another 30,000 Palestinians, lose a lot of manpower yourself, which where Israel can ill afford to do. But what will be the end game? We are now stuck in one of those same situations where you say an initiation to a conflict is very, very simple, but the termination and the resolution seems almost impossible. I am a great fan of the IDF, virtually kept them on a pedestal all my student days. I remember when looking at the 67 war, the 73 war, which is what got me interested into strategic affairs. But it also showed me that ultimately the only answer is two-state theory, which today seems to be dead and buried and unlikely to emerge anytime in the near future. The other aspect we have to remember is that in the period of the 60s, start from 48 onwards, the period of the conventional wars, there was a total domination of the IDF. And my intervention here is mostly militaristic. It was mostly the IDF's domination until 1979. What happened in 1979? Before that, 48, 1956, the Suez Crisis, 1967, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, of 14-day war of 1973, and then came 79. 79 brought Iran, the elephant in the room, into the Middle East. Upset the old apple cart. From here onwards, we haven't seen conventional wars from 1979. The transformation from conventional to hybrid to low-intensity wars, different kinds of wars, has had a very, very different effect in the Middle East. Starting from, let's say, the period of 86, 87, when Intifada 1, Intifada 2, later on Intifada 2 started, the raising of Hamas in 1986, subsequently of the Hezbollah, etc. The coming of proxy war by Iran, since Iran did not enjoy a common border with Israel, the coming of proxy war into the whole theater has changed the entire gamut of things. Because proxy wars are unwinnable. As we are seeing what is happening on our own front here. Proxy wars are not easily winnable. They can take you to a situation where you can claim victory, but everything can be restored in a matter of time. Right? So this is an aspect which will have to be remembered. The nuclearization of Iran created further trouble. The US animosity, antipathy for Iran brought in even greater, more strident support for Israel, even as late as now, $26 billion allocated out of the $95 billion which have been passed by the US Congress. $26 billion are for Israel. So the issue now comes down to how do you win wars? Israel has, well, a major failure on the 7th of October did take place, but the immediate response to it was to go in kinetic, right, into Gaza. 35 kilometer by 15-20 kilometer territory. It is the better part of 9 months. Somehow my military thinking does not allow me to rationalize how an army of 350,000 can get into a territory of 35 kilometers by 15 kilometers and not be able to subjugate the entire population. It's very, very difficult to imagine, right? So that is what leads me to this reduction. Can Israel sustain this? Because we may say that Israel, what makes Israel fight? Everything makes Israel fight. All the rationale that they are looking at, it makes it fight. But it cannot fight effectively. It cannot hope to get victory in the kind of situation that they are looking at the moment. As long as the proxies who have been created as Hezbollah, the Hamas, and now increasingly the Houthis, who are also acting as the major proxies of Iran, although they're not having such a great effect on Israel as such. So, missiles. Look at Iran's preparation. From 1992, this preparation has been on. Its collaboration with North Korea since then. My last visit to Israel, I was told by the IDF that combined between the Hezbollah, Hamas has much less, but Hezbollah primarily, 130,000 missiles exist in this theater, this environment. The Iron Dome cannot handle all that at one time. Some of it has been expended in the recent past, we have seen, but still a very sizable amount of missiles are still in the hands of the proxies. Can Israel continue this fight in this manner, therefore? I mean, there are different ways of fighting which are being followed by one against the other. Now the northern borders are opening up. Lebanon has opened up. Can this lead to, now you're looking at two fronts. Gone are those days of 1967 when Israel could turn around to Syria, against Iraq, against Egypt simultaneously. Three fronts simultaneously, and defeat them all in detail. Right? Today, I'm not sure if Israel is in a position to be able to continue the war in Gaza effectively. At the same time, handling the north, that is the Hezbollah front, and look at missilery, the missile warfare that it has to engage with Iran. It is going to be a major challenge for Iran. So my argument and my narrative, which I'm trying to explain to you, is that Israel will be forced, politically under the current circumstances, forced. Subsequently too, Israel does not have a choice, it has to fight. But a question of the way it could fight effectively in the past, that is something which is questionable for tomorrow. Israel does not have that capability in today's military environment of the Middle East to be able to rule the roost and hope to be able to achieve victory of any kind. Come to today's events. Whatever has happened in Tehran, there is a different counter narrative which is also being spoken about. Is it possible that Hania was invited to Tehran and perhaps given away in the manner which Osama bin Laden may have been given away in Pakistan? That's a completely different narrative which is also being spoken of. Is Iran therefore actually, because each time we have seen Iran's attitude, if you go back 5 years ago also, an initiation is always there, but it peters out. You've seen this happening on the northern front also, again, the exchange of missilery and rockets each time, but subsequently Iran pulls back from the brink. Does Iran perhaps perceive that Hamas has led it into a situation where a pullback may not be possible for Iran itself, and therefore it is actually trying to impact the Hamas leadership physically and otherwise to try and temper its ability to continue this war, to actually pull back from it and not sue for peace, but look for another day to fight. No one in the Middle East in this war is going to look for pullback and subjugation. Whoever does it is going to look for one more day, another day to fight this war. So, the one thing which is definitely not there in Israel's approach today, this is my last point, in Israel's approach today, is a war strategy. It's quite clear that it is moving from moment to moment, right? With that kind of a strategy, to hope to be able to come to a conflict termination forget resolution and conflict termination is something which is extremely difficult. And my last part is, if anyone imagines that the killing of a military leader, a political military leader, as like Hania was, is going to put down a resistance movement, then you got to look at what's happened in Sri Lanka, for example. I, for one, continue to believe that a Prabhakaran has already been born and will come back. The LTT will come back. That's a very extreme example. I can rationalize it. But killing of one Hania does not affect a movement which is as radical as Hamas. If it did not have that radical footprint, of the kind, as what General Shankar was saying, the ideological footprint which it has got. If it was not there, perhaps things may have been different. I'll rest my case here.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for the major points you made. The issues I would like to cap so that things are in focus. There's no doubt Hamas has gained an popular support within the Palestinians. So they will not back out. Neither the Palestinians nor Hamas would have a reason to back out of this, notwithstanding the casualties they're taking. The major point, there's a paradox which most of us politico-military people or leaders always have to face. Conflict initiation is easy, conflict termination is difficult. And that's what I remember our ex-Prime Minister Vajpayee saying in Hindi, "Bhai, युद्ध तो मैं शुरू कर दूंगा, खत्म कैसे करना है?" Learner, this is for you. One of our prime ministers, Mr. Vajpayee, he once said, "Look, I can go into a war with Pakistan, but my problem is how do I end it?" Right? And that is what Israel is facing today. And and most of us who analyze this from day one and the way Israel has gone about it, this is the question which comes to our mind as to how does Israel end this war. And as it goes on, the sustenance of this war is going to be difficult because the arc of violence is increasing, the complexity of violence is increasing, and that's what it is always in a proxy war. So, where is the political end game? Is an important thing which comes up, which in all our minds. The last major point, sir, which you have made, and which I would like all of us to reflect on, is Iran and its game plan. Iran has always been a reticent nation. It is not now. You go back to the Iran-Iraq war, it took the losses, it was reticent, and ultimately it came back, all that. And if you see from that time to now, it has always fought from the shadows. It has never come out of the shadows. Probably the first time it came out of the shadows to fight a war 1-to-1, or rather, face any adversary directly, was 2 months back when it sent 300 missiles or drones across to Israel in a show of force. Otherwise, it has always fought second hand through others, not directly, indirectly. So what Iran will do in this circumstance, how will it bump up the whole equation? It will be interesting to see whether they will do it through their 4Hs or will get directly involved. But whichever way you look at it, there is going to be a certain amount of escalation in this whole process. Right? I made a lot of points. With this, I'd like Colonel Peter to get in. All yours, Colonel Peter. Take it on.
Thank you very much, Generals, Ambassador. It is a great honor to be here today. I feel very, very comfortable being here among esteemed friends and colleagues. And as a military spokesperson, I feel for the international media, I feel that I'm on the threshold both between the international affairs that the ambassador presented and the military affairs that our esteemed generals presented here today. I'll try and walk in the short time that I have through Israel's strategy. And I first of all open and say, I have, and I agree that with the Clausewitzian perspective that war is political intercourse by other means. And so the question, of course, is what are we trying to achieve politically with the means of warfare? And I agree that throughout the course of the almost 10 months now, Israel has been very vague on its outcome. I will say, and I will quote exactly what the defense minister has said. And he said, basically, Defense Minister Gallant has said that there are 3 no's. No Israeli reoccupation of Gaza, no Israeli settlement in Gaza, and no Hamas in Gaza. And I think these are very, very important to understand Israel's perspective of where they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to achieve in the theater of the Gaza Strip. So there are 2 core goals that Israel the IDF is trying to achieve in the Gaza Strip. First of all, to bring back the hostages. 115 Israelis are currently being held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. If they want the war to end, if Hamas wants the war to end, they could release them, they could unconditionally surrender, and there would be no need for the continuation of this war. The second component that Israel is trying to achieve, the second goal that the IDF is trying to achieve, is to dismantle Hamas as a governing authority. Now, why is this important and key to regional stability? Anybody that is aspiring to have any sort of peace in this region needs to come to terms with the fact that Hamas is no partner for peace. They carry the banner of death and destruction of Israel. They aspire to it. And as my esteemed friends here pointed out, they are supported by Iran, by Qatar, in order to build their war effort. Over the last 17 years, Hamas have been in control. So when we ask, what does the population feel about the situation in the Gaza Strip? Of course, the vast majority of the population have no memory of a situation without Hamas in control of the Gaza Strip. So they have perhaps even the difficulty in theoretically dreaming about a reality without a brutal terrorist organization, terrorist government that controls the Gaza Strip. So as we've seen and throughout the course of the last 10 months, the IDF has been successful in dismantling Hamas's governing authority, taking away its terrorist capabilities that they built extensively from the tunnel capabilities, which are a key component in their defensive and offensive capabilities. The level of underground system that they've built, the network, is the most expansive construction project ever to exist in the Gaza Strip. When we look above ground, we see that they have abused the civilian terrain for their war effort, and they have basically subjugated the entire civilian system for their war effort. They have put command and control positions in hospitals. They have utilized under the UN banner staging grounds, operations rooms, all of these types of activities in order to try and conduct attacks against Israel, launch rocket attacks against Israel, to try and engage Israel in a way which will jeopardize the safety and security of the people of Israel and the forces that are currently operating. And so the war effort has developed throughout the course of this war with very clear goals from a military perspective, but very vague goals from a political perspective. The military effort to cut off the Gaza Strip from its tunnel system into Egypt, into the Sinai Desert, has been so far successful. Over 20 tunnels, cross-border tunnels, have been sealed and destroyed. The vast amount of terrorist infrastructure, manufacturing capabilities are being destroyed. And I would say almost every day this is advancing. It is, of course, tactical and operational and not strategic in its essence, because there does need to be a strategic goal that dismantles Hamas and puts somebody else in that position of controlling the Gaza Strip. And I would say for the benefit of Israelis and Palestinians alike. So until we can defeat Hamas and make sure that they haven't got the power to govern the Gaza Strip, this war effort from a military perspective can continue. We will continue to dismantle, destroy, progress every single day in the different operations in different areas. Just this morning, here I'm seeing the reports of the ongoing operations in the Tel el-Sultan area, down south in the southern areas of the Gaza Strip. And this indeed is meaningful for the progress of dismantling a mechanism that has been built for the last 17 years. I think it's important to notice also that throughout the course of the Hamas's control over the Gaza Strip, we have seen them in a learning curve after every single conflict, whether it was a direct conflict with Israel in 2008, Operation Cast-led, or the indirect confrontations with proxies like Palestinian Islamic Jihad, an Iranian proxy that operates within the Gaza Strip, much smaller, but also powerful with rockets and capabilities. So when they decided to invade Israel on the 7th of October in an unprecedented attack, brutally murdering, massacring, raping, burning some 1,200 people, civilians and soldiers, they determined their destiny and the ability for Israel to ever accept them to continue to control the Gaza Strip. What we saw in their action was basically they had signed their own death warrant in that act, because Israel, over the course of the years, had been standoffish with regard to Hamas. Successive governments in Israel had continued to try and create a sense of, I would say, a standoff relationship with Hamas government, while trying not to undermine the relationship with the Palestinian Authority to a certain extent. But Hamas was intended strategically. The governments of Israel wanted Hamas to be weak enough not to attack Israel, but strong enough to govern the Gaza Strip effectively. And so, over the course of the year before the war, what we saw is an increase of Palestinian workers from Gaza coming into Israel, some 18,000 workers, bringing in finances, bringing in money, bringing in stability and security and social security to their families and to the broader society as well. And of course, we have the financial support from Qatar that the Israeli government supported as well, and made sure that the flow of cash to Hamas from Qatar continued. Of course, this cash was the enabler of Hamas to build its infrastructure. The paragliders that came over on the 7th of October, the naval forces of Hamas, and on the fast boats that came around the fence on the coastal scene, and the motorbikes and Nukhba forces that penetrated the border to begin with, advanced into the different locations across the border, and conducted their massacre of so many Israelis. So as we look forward, there needs to be a strategic change vis-a-vis the relationship between Israel and Gaza. I would say that the idea from a political perspective, from a global political perspective, when we launched this war, should have been, and unfortunately it wasn't, that we create a global coalition to get rid of Hamas. That global coalition was ready, it was prime. The amount of leaders that came to Israel in force to show solidarity and support for Israel at the beginning of the conflict has tapered down because of civilian consequences, civilian casualties. And I think that this is a challenge now that Israel needs to face, and the IDF, of course, is taking it in consideration as well. In the last few moments that I want to talk about the front with Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah launched effectively its war on Israel on the 8th of October. It was limited in scope and scale, but it has been a daily thing every single day, which has been mostly missed by most of the world media and very, very rarely talked about even in diplomatic circles. But on the first few days after the 8th of October, they conducted some 7 attempts to infiltrate into Israel. Over the course of almost 10 months now, they've conducted some 7,000 rocket attacks towards Israel from Lebanon. So what we do need is a revamped, reorganized attempt to reinstate the 1701 United Nations Security Council resolution to distance Hezbollah from the south of Lebanon, to push them north so that they agree that there are no weapons in the south, so that Israel can live. There are 60,000 people that are currently out of home in the north of Israel. I have friends that have personally been evacuated from their homes. They won't go home unless there is a sense of security. And I'm not even certain that even a 1701 situation with the United Nations Security Council resolution will actually deliver that to their confidence. And the last few words that I will say is about the notions and the actions of the last 24 hours in these targeted killings against Fouad Shukar and Ismail Haniyeh. So targeted killings are a counterterrorism mechanism which is intended to deliver 3 core components. First of all, to create a level of disruption in the terrorist infrastructure's capability to operate. If Fouad Shukar, who has a very, very long list of terrorist activities all the way back from 1983 in the attack against the US Marines, killing 241 US Marines, all the way up until last Saturday when 12 kids playing football in Majd al-Shams, he was all on top of this. So when we look at his involvement, of course, he was a clear target. To disrupt his ability to operate and execute the instructions of Hassan Nasrallah is a key component to exert capabilities and conduct those. On the other hand, in the strike that has been attributed to Israel, although Israel has not confirmed it was Israeli forces that conducted the strike against Ismail Haniyeh. Of course, Ismail Haniyeh is a senior figurehead, the number one person in Hamas, the person that has all of the resources and the political clout and power to operate within and around the world. Of course, he too, if you disrupt his ability to operate, you are impeding on the ability to, on one hand, negotiate, but also to conduct their war effort as well. So that's disruption. The second D that I want to talk about is the ability to decapitate the leaders that are deeply involved. So I would say it is absolutely important that they feel pursued and are pursued. There can be no room for terrorists like these arch terrorists to operate freely in the world, to feel that they have the sanctity of their own homes. These are arch terrorists that have caused death and destruction, not only against Israel, but also in other places. And the final D that I want to talk about is the deterrence. And this, of course, has a component of psychology also involved. And there is a need that people that decide and think that it's a good idea to attack Israel know that Israel has the ability, the knowledge, and the know-how in order to seek you out wherever you are hiding, whether it's in the heart of Tehran or in the heart of Beirut, in the Dakhia neighborhood, where they are in their fortresses, or where they felt safe up until now. And with that, gentlemen, I'm happy to take any questions, of course, within the realm of my understanding and knowledge of this conflict. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Colonel Peter. I think you made some very, very important points. You brought into focus the 115 hostages who are still with, Hamas, and their future is one of the major goals, or rather, getting them back remains. Many times we tend to forget that in the rest of the whole story. Okay, then I'll talk a little about the political end game, which you actually you've thrown light on it, much as what we felt earlier in the course of the discussion, that what is the political end game of Israel? If I coined it, you said it. No, Hamas and Gaza is one political end game. And the second thing, which is more basic, for which why is Israel fighting on? It is existential, and that existential end game is something which they can't compromise. In the absence of not being able to achieve intermediate political goals, they have to fight on for the existential goal. That's the way I look at it. If I can make a case for Israel, right? And you said the dichotomy where the military goals are clear and the political goals are pretty vague persists. It's not going to be there, right? And there's a strategic challenge on. And I quite like the idea which you said that, look, arch terrorists like the Hamas have to be wiped out, and that there's no doubt. And if it's only a wish, like what others also have said today. If there was a UN-backed effort, and if you had gone in for targeted decapacitating, or disruption of the leadership, you would have got far more disruption and probably far more results. And that was a general opinion for many of us in India, but that was not to be. We'll get back to you with this thing. I'll fire a few short questions. I would like your views on this, and then we'll take questions from everyone else. Gautam Murthy, sir, my thing to you is, how do you think Iran will react to the whole story, considering the fact that one is we've made the case that Iran is a reticent actor in this whole story, and Iran itself is going through a bit of a problem after Ibrahim Raisi died. There's a new prime minister in chair. That equation is not good, and without such an equation not good, do you think Iran will come out with all guns firing, right? And that's the question. So with this, where do you think Iran is going to go, and how it's going to play its thing out in the future? Can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. I'll start with what General HASNAIN very clearly said, that Iran, and he has made a very pertinent observation, has pulled back from the brink each and every time. They continue to fight with the proxies. They've built up Hezbollah with over 130,000, 130,000 missiles and rockets. they will try to hit back because Iran has seen this as a humongous humiliation. Their friends, the entire Arab world, all the leaders of Islamic nations were there for the swearing in of the president. It was a VVIP event, and everyone went there to express solidarity. And we've seen so many clips about each one of them hugging Hania, and and Hania really being the toast of the town, so to speak. And now, while he was under protection of Iran, this is what happens to him. So Iran, to my mind, will hit back. Let us see whether that hit back, the way they hit back, can be controlled, like what happened last time after the Damascus bombing of the consulate, where their general was planning attacks on Israel, and Israel didn't hold back on that. So this is also, Israel has sent a very strong strategic message, not only to Iran, but to the entire Arab world, saying if we can get him, we can get anyone. We can get the Ayatollahs, we can get anybody. We can get any leader who takes decisive action against us, who we consider him to be a terrorist. This strong message goes on. Now, the Arab world too is in ferment. The Arab leaders may say something, they may be quiet, they may be reticent, they don't want the countries to get involved. But the Arab street has been seething with anger for the last 10 months. We have seen it. There's enough of social media, there's enough of other clips, channels all over the place. The Arab street is not happy. So you are finding a huge kind of social unrest that is likely to take place, but not so much in Iran, because in Iran, if there's a social unrest, it is to oust the regime. We have seen the case of Mahisi, the girl who was killed, and the kind of protests that took place. So Iran has to handle their internal front. Iran is not democratic like Israel. Israel may have divisions in the society, but they're handling it democratically. Everything's out in the open. So Iran would, I go with General HASNAIN, would do something to make a show of hitting Israel, but would try and pull back from the brink. That's what.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your views. I now would like Ambassador TRIGUNAYAT, sir. I posed this to you earlier. Where do you see Russia? How do you see Russia and China operating in this kind of a situation? Especially because you felt that, with the escalated situation, USA might not have the leverage to control Iran. So it will be incumbent virtually on Russia and China, or probably even India, to get into the whole deal. Your views on this?
Well, sir, I think that nobody wanted the escalation. And unfortunately, from October 7 onwards, what we have seen is the world has only been concerned about the escalation, that there should be no escalation. And there was no effort by anybody really to address the whole issue that could have been taken care of. I agree with Colonel Lerner about the removal of Hamas. But I think that there was, as you had also mentioned, that there was another way of doing it. Like if you were to take out the Hamas leaders the way you do, then it would be the world, would have stood with you mostly, including the Arab countries. But the way the 40,000 odd civilians have suffered there, that has created a very major problem. Now, as far as Russia and China are concerned, I think that we are looking at a different emergence of a very peculiar grouping today, and which is seen as CIRN, CIRN, which is China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea. Now, that is something in response to, and I see that it is something to do with Cold War 2.0 in a larger context that we are going to see. This war will continue or last or end, whatever happens in the Middle East. If it does not escalate, it's fine. Or if it escalates, as you rightly mentioned, that Iran today may not do it by themselves, but they have their proxies to do some kind of a punishment and some kind of a direct hit somewhere. There could be a similar kind of a tit for tat. attempt as well that could happen in Israel. You never know. But at the same time, China and Russia both have condemned it. Somehow, President Putin was livid with the Israeli strike in southern Lebanon. The French, the Saudis, everybody is concerned about the escalation on that Lebanon front. And so I feel that USA obviously will stand by, which Lloyd Austin has already said, that we will continue to support Israel, its right to defend itself. But I think that what if at all Israel will not accept it, but if it accepts that it is them who have done it in Tehran, then there will definitely be some repercussions. Although I know last time there was through Oman, when the consulate was attacked, then via Oman the messaging was going on between USA and Iran, and Iran beforehand informed the Americans that this is the time that they are going to, this is the way and how it will happen. Of course, Israel took the credit that all these 99% of missiles were shot down, but this was all pre-planned, and it was total messaging was done. In fact, the Americans even said that, oh, we were supposed to have 48 hours, it was done in 24 hours. So we have seen how it happened. But in this, definitely, the Iran will be fully supported by Russia as well as by China in this. But not to allow the escalation to happen, because this directly impact. Russia is already pretty much engaged in its own war. Iran is supplying also some of these material to war material to Russia. China is not in the position right now to escalate further. It is also waiting. But USA doesn't have the bandwidth at the moment really to go forward beyond a point. So hopefully these will act as some kind of a brakes. But that's being too hopeful in my view.
Yeah, I agree with you, sir. Whatever Russia and China will do might not be enough to hold Iran back to what it does. So we are hoping for the best. General HASNAIN, so the question to you from most people, which most people are asking, and I'll throw it to you, is what do we learn from this entire story, and why don't we handle our terrorist situation the way Israel does? And this question, I will not let it go unanswered, because we've been discussing about it in different contexts. But I think there's probably the right time for us to also reflect on that.
Doctor, thank you. But let me take 30 seconds to answer what has been discussed just now both by Ambassador Anil and by General Moorthy. I remind you of the killing of Soleimani.
Yes.
Do you think the killing of Soleimani was more important than the killing of Hania? For Iran, Iran's prestige was on Soleimani, the head of the IRGC. And the killing of Soleimani did not lead to that kind of a response. If you remember, this is what I was speaking about.
I agree with you.
Yes, sir.
A couple of exchanges here and there, and they pull back. You've seen this in the recent past too. Iran is into this game for some kind of different psychological purposes. It seems it doesn't want to take this war beyond. It doesn't have the confidence to be able to do it either. They want to remain relevant to the whole situation. They want to make sure that they have a kind of a preponderance over the Arab world in the support that they give to the Palestinian people. That is what becomes very evident to me from the kind of actions which Iran has taken in the recent past at times when it has been instigated. That's one. The more important issue which you have thrown at me now. First of all, this is apples and oranges, right?
Yeah.
Really, I mean, in the sense that you can't equate anything around the world and say, he's done it like that, so we should do it like that also, right? We have a different concept of doing it. Israel is a question of survival, which you said yourself, very correct, existential, right? They are fighting it out. Here we've got one portion of India which is affected. It's not as if the entire Indian territory is affected. It was at one time, but ever since 2008, 9, 10 perhaps, thereafter, this has been limited only to Jammu and Kashmir, right? Our concept is retention of the people as a part of the Indian Union, the integration of the people. So as a result, what we do is surgical. Everything is surgical. We are going after terrorists, but we are not hunting out the local people, or we're not affecting the local people. Israel's concept of fighting a hybrid war is to hammer the 1,000-pound bombs onto Gaza. Do you expect that to happen to Pulwama or to within Jammu or some place like that? I mean, this is a joke to even discuss this, actually. Because in India, people have no idea about this. They just say something great is happening there, they're winning this war. Israel is not winning this war. First of all, let's be very clear, Israel is not winning this war. At the moment, we are stuck in an awkward stalemate where it is attempting to take it forward in its own way. India, we have sorted out things. We have reduced the strength of terrorists from 4,000, 5,000 down to 120, 150. That is something. No one gives any credit for that to the Indian Armed Forces, to the whole system that India has got. Forget the armed forces alone. It is the political community, the intelligence community, everyone working together, integrated to reduce. Now, this is a long drawn-out thing. In India, everyone expects immediate solutions. You've seen the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict has gone on for that many years too. They are nowhere near any solution. We are at least coming to a situation where the asymmetry here is going to dictate the environment subsequently. We bring down terrorism to as low a level as possible and work very hard to secure ourselves to make sure that Pakistan cannot spiral that out of control once again. That's the concept that India is following. And I respect the method which the Indian Armed Forces are adopting.
I would like to reinforce what you say. So I took this question on because there are a lot of people who think that we can achieve our political objective the Israeli way, and you won't. Our political objectives are what? Peace. We want democracy back. If you think that the way Israel operated, we went and operated in Kashmir or across the LOC, we could have held elections the way we did, or we're going to hold in the next 2 months, we couldn't have. Right? We can't do what Israel. That's our political system, and the political the environment is completely different. You think we could have, we could have achieved a political victory like scrapping of Article 370 if the military had been anything but what we were, right? Political scrapping of, I mean, people have to realize, scrapping Article 370 was such a political victory, for which Pakistan didn't have an answer. For the first time in my entire dealing and with about thinking about Kashmir and Pakistan, the Pakistan army was left on the sidelines, wringing its hands as to what to do. So far, they have not recovered, and that couldn't have happened if the army had behaved anywhere near the way Israeli army or the IDF has worked. But that doesn't mean that the Israeli army has done wrong. By our standards, it's done differently by their standards in their conditions. It is their conditions. It's not for us to judge sitting here. Look, they went wrong. Like what Peter said, they have shown their military goals have been clear and they've acted as per their military goals. Their, political goals have been vague and they've not been able to achieve that. And that is something which we cannot forget. I'm reinforcing this because many times we are expected to behave. The Indian army is expected to behave like the Israeli Defense Forces, which it will never. Okay, having said that,
can I
yes,
add 30 seconds? Having
yes,
said
please,
all this, whatever I said, I am totally for the IDF in the sense that the IDF has the right to defend itself. It cannot be subjected to what happened on it to it on the 7th of October, whatever be the situation. And the Indian Army, if this had happened to the Indian Army and to our system of what happened on 7th of October, I can assure you we would have responded maybe differently, but we would have responded very strongly too.
Yes, sir. We have. In fact, if you go back to Pulwama, what happened in Pulwama and the way we responded, the response was quite severe and, proportional. Okay. And like you rightly said, the IDF has also done what it has to, because at the end of the day, the IDF is still fighting to get its hostages back. And There's a question which is coming up, which is a very relevant question. I'll throw it up a little later. And we need to focus on that because oftentimes we lose sight of the fact that who initiated this whole story and why was it initiated, right? Uh, okay, now we'll get back to Peter. Peter, you did say one of the initial goals of Israel, no Hamas in Gaza, right? 9 months down, Hamas is gaining popularity. But then you're taking certain actions like this to finish off and decapacitate and deter Hamas. How do you think Israel will go ahead or the IDF will go ahead to achieve that goal of no Hamas? Do you think it's feasible at all? That's a larger question.
So first of all, I'd like to relate to one question.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
To what General HASNAIN said. In Israel, on the 7th of October, 1,002 Israelis were butchered, murdered, massacred, and another 240 were abducted. Try and think about the equivalent in India of this mass, of a result of such an attack on Indian territory. It would be something like 180,000 Indians brutally murdered and massacred in one day. This is hard to grasp. It's like, if you just think about it and put it in context, what would you expect your government, what would you expect from your military forces, what you would expect from the world community, how would you expect them to come around and rally around your goals in order to achieve that goal? So I think it's important, the context is the understanding. In a small country of 9 million people, everybody has somebody they know, somebody that they're related to, a friend, a son, a daughter, somebody that is connected that was murdered on that day. I have two friends who served with me in the military that were killed on that day, on the 7th of October. My daughter, a sister of one of her friends, was brutally massacred in the Nova party. So this is the type of situation we face. And of course, it does not excuse the military from its failures of that day, which I can elaborate on as far as I see them. But I think it is important to understand the context of what this means for Israeli society. Sir, to get back to your question, I do believe that Hamas can be removed from governance in the Gaza Strip. It needs to be done in a strategic way, where there is an alternative government that is empowered, either with international support, with other Arab states from the region, which are still part and parcel of the solution for the Gaza Strip. It needs to take into consideration the broader regional aspects as well, which is a front against the Iranian offensive against Israel. As you pointed out, many of you pointed out earlier today, Iran has created a circle of fire around Israel, from Hezbollah in the north down to the Shiite militias in Iraq, of course, Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the Houthis in Yemen. So when we look at the amount of effort that they are going to, we need to create a defensive wall against those elements. It can only be done if we remove Hamas. If Hamas, in any way or form, is permitted to stay in control in Gaza, it will be a devastating message for this region. It will undermine security for years and years to come. It will send a clear message to Hezbollah that it's an open season for them to do whatever they want. It will give a very, very bad message to Iran that they can pursue all of the diabolical intentions that they have. So I would say, yes, we can get rid of Hamas. It needs to be a multi-tiered effort, both militarily, diplomatically, politically, and it also requires the Israeli politicians in Israel to rally around one idea of what the day after in Gaza looks like for Israel. Not for people of Gaza even. First of all, what does Israel want vis-a-vis the relationship with the people of Gaza, then we need to draw from the end to the beginning exactly the steps we need to take in order to achieve those.
Oh, thanks a lot. I think that's a nice way of putting it. From the end point, what you want, regress back to what you can through political unity and a coordinated action. But I'd like to put one point in context which you mentioned. I would like to assure you, or I'd like to repeat it again, that we understand why Israel reacted the way it did react. Right? That's why I invoked this case, which in our own case, what happened at Pulwama. If you don't know what happened at Pulwama, let me put it out. There was a terrorist attack where we lost over 40 soldiers, and immediately the very short time, there were surgical strikes carried out. We violated we crossed the international border into Pakistan to carry out airstrikes. And at that point of time, almost Pakistan and India came to war. I mean, it was probably two nuclear nations coming to war head on. So we understand why Israel has reacted the way it has. The only regret, I will put it this way, is it could have probably, like you said, done it a little more surgically. Things would have been far better. But then, if wishes were horses, then dreams would come true. We'll leave it at that. Right. Gentlemen, we've had a tremendous dialogue about this whole story, where it is going. And we, at the end of an hour and 20 minutes of discussion, it's very clear that Ismail Haniya is just one small milestone and a blip in this whole journey. And we have a long way to go ahead. And things are going to be complicated. In this context, there's a very nice and interesting question which has come up, which I'd like to throw. And it is this. Arunachal Mudargikar asked, for the conflict initiation, Hamas is responsibility, but the responsibility of termination is sole responsibility of Israel. Why not make Palestine take the responsibility of termination? And it's a very interesting question, because I will put it this way. It is not only why not make Palestine and the Arab world or whoever it is take the responsibility of termination, and how do you do it? Who will do it? What's the mechanism to do it? Ambassador, how about you? Would you like to take a shot at this?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, actually. But the fact remains is what we are looking at is a state and a non-state actor. So this is something that Hamas has treated as a terrorist group, and they have indulged in terror operations, which they call as some kind of a freedom fighting in this spirit. And Israel has been responding the way they know. They know how to do it. So if there were two-state solution, obviously you could pinpoint on Palestine or anybody else that XYZ state is there. But therefore, this question does not arise. I mean, how can Palestine terminate it? They don't have their army, they don't have any independence, even their airports. So it is not for them. Can become only, as India also promotes, that there should be a dialogue on the both sides. That first thing is ceasefire. Ceasefire, they were all talking about release of the hostages. That was very much there. But the goalposts have been changing all the time. And in my view, personally, I have written about it also, that neither Hamas nor Netanyahu, I would not say Israel, because there is a differences between the IDF leadership as well as the political leadership in Israel. We have seen that Benny Gantz quit. Now Gallant, our friend Colonel Lerner very clearly mentioned about the 3 goals about no Hamas and all that. But they are not identical to what Bibi says or Netanyahu speaks. He does not want to give up on that. So the question is that you have to see in the context that how can you control unless you talk about it. When the ceasefire discussions go on, Americans are at a loose end. Basically, they don't know what to do further. The Blinken's message today, after that Haniyeh's or even that the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's message, they are so anodyne that just hopes are there that, okay, it will not escalate further. Okay, there may be some respect for the ceasefire, but both sides have been changing the goalposts. So it has not been possible, and I don't think it's easy to terminate. And people might say that you can remove Hamas completely, but as the generals in the army or chief of the army staff of the IDF also himself mentioned that it is not possible to defeat Hamas. That was just last week. Because it's an ideology, and it's not, you may kill some people, some leaders here and there, you may decapacitate there, you can decapitate them, but at the same time that there are the thousands of people who have been actually suffering. They will not become normal tomorrow just because there is a ceasefire or there is no war. So there is a longish and they have to basically a mindset change on both sides, then only they can live together.
Thank you, sir. This question, I would request Peter to take it on. Bharat Vichar says, China thinks the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniya could derail the China-brokered Palestinian unity deal. Also, with Haniya's death, will Hezbollah gain more power? Your take on that. All yours, Peter.
Sure. So I think that China's power projection will try to become more relevant in the international stage with trying to bring back Hamas and Fatah together was more symbolic than actual realization. I think that the distance between Hamas and Fatah today are miles and miles beyond one another, and I think it also relates to the former question of how to terminate the war and who in Palestine can actually bring that. And I would say today, currently, Abbas is not strong enough to unify the Palestinian society. In the Gaza Strip, there is no alternative authority because of Hamas's brutal rule over the Gaza Strip. And so we need to try and create an alternative, a new reality. I think that Hania's death will not necessarily relate to Hezbollah's gain of power. I think Hezbollah, in its own grief over its own leaders today, the head of their terrorist infrastructure, when they come to a conclusion, a decision of how they are going to respond to this, if they respond to this, I think is the biggest question when we look at the incident, not of Hania, but rather of Fuad Shakur, who is much more closer to home than Hania and Hezbollah.
Thanks a lot.
May I add
yes,
a line
please.
to this? I fully endorse exactly what the Colonel has just said. But I also want to reinforce it by saying that China is considered by a lot of people as playing a very active role in the Middle East. To my mind, China does not know the Middle East. It does not know Islam. It does not know ideologies of Islam, and is trying to play a very artificial kind of a role. In 1.5 to 2 months, we heard them brokering a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran and saying that the age-old Shia-Sunni conflict has been resolved. My God, someone who manages to resolve that should be called God and nothing more. Right? So now the Chinese come and they say that they have settled this conflict between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, that is the Fatah. I'm absolutely with the Colonel. I mean, perhaps the Hamas and Fatah have greater animosity between them than they have with the state of Israel. That is what it is, as bad as that. So I think this question, whoever's asked this question, Bharat Vichar Sahab, you need to understand this properly in perspective, because your question is itself begging the question itself.
But sir, if I may say something to you, I fully agree with
please,
you
please.
that they may not know, but China is so much invested and has become increasingly important in Middle East. And in India, I think we should not think of it as some small event. You see, with the Israel and Iran, they know that there is a problem, and they have cast their vote with basically the Palestinians and the Arabs. They understand. They have been increasing their footprint there. So essentially, what they are trying to do is, they know that as long as these groups are 14 groups are divided, or especially the Hamas and Fatah, they do have a problem. This is a fundamental problem. They have tried a couple of times. 2021 again, there was a discussion when they were jointly trying to host the elections and get the once again, but Abbas did not want that. So there is a power grab kind of a thing. But legitimacy of both the groups currently is in big question mark. So I think that what is being done is just to bring them, talk to one another, and agree to be united for the cause of Palestine. Now, in that, there is always the case. But as far as Iran and Saudi Arabia is concerned, I must say that anything that happens good in the region, if they somehow, including with Israel, and let us not forget, before 1979, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran all were on the side of the Americans. It is not the first time. They can always come back. If there is a change in Iran, you can see tomorrow something different happening. So there is no, the red line in that sense, but China is trying to have its longest game in the Middle East. And I think that that's what they're trying to do. From my point of view, I feel that if there is any kind of a rapprochement, even a modus vivendi, not necessarily great friendships among the region, that will be good for us, good for the world.
My
Yeah,
only
thanks
point,
a lot.
Ambassador Anil, my only point, Ambassador Anil, was that the Chinese are trying very hard. Their intent is maybe perhaps good, but their overall understanding of Middle East is still very nascent.
Agree, sir. I
Yeah,
fully agree.
yeah, that is a very good question. Many people would be thinking, why are we talking of, Iran and Israel before 79, 79, 79? To reinforce a point, I would like to tell people before 79, Israel and Iran were good friends. In fact, there was even an oil pipeline which was planned between Israel and Iran. Well, the pipeline is where it is, and the enmity has gone in a different direction, but that's history. But that's how history can change back also. History has got funny ways of changing. Uh, I would like General Gautam Murthy to take this on from Colonel Just Sekon. Can we now understand that Israel will be expanding its territorial stability and the Arab world will be divided in their consensus on this? Well, right, that's the first state. But the second question is important. Will India and USA have a role to play in all this? Or rather to stabilize the situation? I would put it this way. I would say, what is the role of India in this whole story?
See, India's role in this whole situation is that India can actually play an honest broker. My colleague and friend, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, has written about it. We have discussed it on two other earlier Casa webinars. You will also recollect, General Shankar, that we said that India has the ability to play a role in getting some kind of a consensus and in talking peace. But for that, the time has to be right, because India is seen as a friend of Israel. India is seen as a friend by the Palestinian Authority. India is seen as a friend by most Arab countries. In fact, by all Arab countries. We've had a problem with Turkey recently, but Turkey I would keep to a side. We have got good relations with Iran too. So actually, India is in a good place, and our diplomats are second to none in the world. Once they get the green signal to start working on it, they will be able to move from capital to capital and try and get people together. Yes, I would say that as India assumes its rightful place in the world, India does have a role to play in ensuring stability in West Asia. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. This message, I wouldn't say it's a question, it's a message, and I would like Peter to have a read about it and take it back to your countrymen. We all Indians love Israel. Would like to remind you that India is a second home to all Israelians, right? And we've all grown up and we've all had some dealings or other with Israelis, and we would like Israel to come out, at the end. Uh, I wouldn't say successful. I would say a more stable country than what it is today, right? And looking good. So, I mean, and what we have spoken today largely is completely bipartisan and professional, right? The way things have gone, it's an open analysis. Okay. Right. There's a statement, but I would like General HASNAIN to comment on this. Israel is fighting a multiple front war with different battle scenarios, such as tunnel, drone, terrorism, hostage, different missiles. War as such, the world has never seen or fought. So, if you could transpose it into our situation and make a general comment about it, so because I think Israel is facing a real tough situation, and going ahead, I don't think this situation is going to get easier.
There is no doubt about it. Why are we only talking to here? Look at what happened in 1967. 67, Israel was battling against 3 to 4 fronts simultaneously. That was the time when the Arab countries were on a gung ho kind of attitude. Nasserism was at its peak, and Nasser on the other side, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, everyone had come together, and it was all it. But for the early morning strike on the 6th of June or 5th of June, 1967, which the Israeli Air Force put in, perhaps the situation may have been very different at that time. So Israel is quite used to fighting multiple fronts. There's no doubt about it. They fight one place, to switch over to the other side. They can have their attention simultaneously on different areas, etc. What worries me is the kind of things that they have faced in Gaza. They were not prepared for it at all, which is what surprised me hugely. That a country which has had the experience of so many conventional wars, in a defense force which is so militarily competent, somehow lost its sheen in terms of its leadership, its intelligence capability. How could miles and miles of concretized tunnels emerge in a territory on your neighborhood? I mean, there itself, a territory which is virtually under your control. I mean, when you see a serial like Fauda, you realize, my God, the kind of, Israel has got a complete surveillance on almost every inch of Gaza territory. How did all this happen? That is what sometimes I have to question myself. I fail to fathom it. And this is something that Peter could perhaps explain to us as to what really went wrong. I mean, every other part of the borders, etc., were under surveillance. But here was a territory known to be animostic to you. And if you, and in various contingencies, you would have planned that this kind of a thing may happen in Gaza. Wasn't the IDF prepared for it? Even nascently prepared for it to say that some kind of a thing like this will happen? Fighting in built-up areas. Israel did not have that kind of experience of fighting with armor, etc., in built-up areas. They had done marvelously in the maneuver battle in Six-Day War in 73 and things like that. But fighting in urban terrain against this kind of opposition, they did not have the kind of experience. So yes, this has been a major issue as far as Israel is concerned. As far as we are concerned, the lessons for us is you should not take your eyes away from any part of your territory which is under threat. I think you look at the example of Jammu and Kashmir. We were on pig's back on Kashmir. It's a very minor example comparatively because we haven't lost out on Jammu in any way as such. This will all come back in a matter of months. It will all be retracted. It's a very dynamic kind of a situation. But we did perhaps take our eyes off for a moment from the scanner. And that cannot be done because you have fought very hard to stabilize various fronts. Lives have been lost while doing it. And it's sacrilege if you lose that kind of a control which you have established over that territory. That's exactly the lesson we should be learning from there. But I would love to listen from Colonel Peter as to what do you think about my perception of the idea of incompetence to be able to do surveillance and get information of the kind which they needed to do as far as Gaza was concerned.
Peter, all yours.
So I don't agree. I think that the IDF had a good understanding of Hamas's capabilities, how it was entrenched, where it was operating from, the types of weapons that it had developed, the extent and the uses of its tunnel system, so I think that from my understanding, from what I experienced in the 8 months of reserve duty, I think the grasp of the IDF's how to operate in urban area where the enemy has used the urban area as a fortress for its defense was taken into consideration. Absolutely, I think the failures of the IDF were and mostly. At least from what I can see up until now, in two core issues. First of all, on the 7th of October itself, the strategic, operational, and tactical failures of that day, which are currently being investigated internally in the IDF, and I'm sure that there will be a commission of inquiry, government commission of inquiry that will also look into them. Those are three different levels of failure which need to be addressed. It did not relate into the knowledge or the understanding of the weapons and the abilities that Hamas had and the ability to operate. On the second component, I do believe that Israel, the IDF, based on what colleagues from Sandhurst to West Point are saying, the way the IDF operates in urban areas is unprecedented in the nature of warfare, in an enemy that has done everything to take advantage of the laws of armed conflict in order to try and impede on our ability to operate. On the other hand, we have done, and the IDF has done so much in order to get civilians out of harm's way and pave the way basically to reach the terrorists wherever they're hiding and how they're operating. So I do believe that our we understand and understood well in advance the types of enemies that we are expected to face in Gaza or in Lebanon, in the urban areas, and where they're operating from and how they are operating. Of course, these are the challenges of our times, and I would argue actually that no military, no advanced military such as the Indian Armed Forces or the Western militaries in the US, UK, or elsewhere have actually been confronted with such an enemy that has embedded itself so deeply within the civilian urban arena, and that the way that the IDF is operating is indeed in accordance to the laws of armed conflict, but also in a way that the ground and the efforts are conducting on the ground are constantly learning and improving. So if we created a map and a system to identify where there are people and where people need to evacuate from, okay? So we announced at the beginning, we announced people to evacuate from certain neighborhoods. And as the war effort developed, we actually supplied maps to the people on the ground so that they would have a better understanding of where they should go from and to. Keeping in mind that when you make such an announcement, you're actually announcing to the enemy where you're coming. And this is the double-edged sword that perhaps you could be jeopardizing your own forces. And that is why when you mobilize in such an area, you first of all, you put forward extensive combat engineering capabilities. Secondly, you have a ground mobilization that has to operate in an arena which is a 360-degree threat, because the tunnel system that connects one house to another and enables the Hamas terrorists, to go seemingly innocently from one place to another without the weapons, because they had pre-prepared these locations with weaponry, with explosive devices, with sniper rifles, with drone capabilities. All of these within the urban arena, which pose a significant challenge to all militaries in this day and age. And I would say that what I've seen in the course of my reserve duty, I saw that militaries from around the world are coming to Israel to see how Israel conducted its urban warfare, because everybody understands that this is the type of threat our enemies, and I think this is also another reason why we need to rally around Israel, is because if we don't defeat Hamas, all terrorist organizations in the world will take a cue from Hamas, and that is what they will do in order to try and impede on anybody, any decent military, decent country trying to defend itself against diabolical intentions of terrorists. We need to ensure that we have the freedom, but also the techniques, technology, and tactics in order to defeat them.
Thank you for your views. This is where we're coming to the end of a fascinating discussion, where we've discussed many angles of this entire story, right? I'll take a comment from someone called Pritam. I'll handle it. He says Israel IDF is competent, Indian army is miles behind. It's a compliment to Israel and something against Indian army. I'll take it. I'm a Democrat and I don't mind only doing YouTube shows. That's something I don't agree, because you're looking at 3 veterans who actually taken part in operations, and we've achieved quite a bit, right? And all you have to do is just open up our histories, and you'll know what we've done. This is not the place where we have to come and say that, look, I'm a Rambo. Okay. And this is the time I'd like to put it across to everyone who's listening to all of us, right? We've done our time in the army. Each of us, 3 lieutenant generals are sitting here. We've done 40 years plus serving this nation and doing good to whatever we could. And I think we've come out we've left India and the Indian army in a better shape than what we entered. That's the first thing which I'd like to put across to everyone. And we've entered a stage in life, all of us, where we are giving back to all of you what we have learned. India is not a very great strategic thinking nation, where many of us don't, the Aam Janta, all of you, are not exposed to strategic thinking the way people in the West are exposed in other countries are. And unless we put across all these issues to you, you will never understand the intricacies of conflicts as they occur and the political, and the other issues which are, connected with conflict. And India as a growing power needs a educated population to handle the challenges which are coming. And if we are going to be a power of consequence, we have to do this. And please remember, India is a country which is living in a extreme nuclear environment with two nuclear adversaries on our head and a major challenge in Indian Ocean region. To compare Israel and army and the Indian army is comparing apples and oranges, right? So I wouldn't like it to do that. But we respect the Israel army for what it is and the professional competence it has. And we personally learned from it. And all of us, like General HASNAIN has said, self and General Gautam, we've actually read the Yom Kippur War and the Six-Day War, threadbare to learn huge lessons in our formative years. And today in our old age, we are still learning from the Israel army what it is doing in its neighborhood. So with this, if you have anything to say, General HASNAIN sir, you're the senior most here. Please shoot, and then we will wrap it up.
General Shankar, all I have to say is that right through my career, today I may be speaking, but I always considered myself more of a listener. If you listen, this is my advice to all the people who have been commenting here, and there are hundreds of comments here. But those comments are like chatter. I've been reading them. They're like chatter. You rarely come across a question which is competent, which can actually instigate our brains. And that shows the quality of our strategic culture. We have to understand this. And when you question this aspect of the Indian army being a YouTube army, let me tell you one thing. We are doing our duty of giving it back, exactly what General Shankar just said. Giving it back to the system to allow people to thrive, to understand from what we have learned. We have learned a lot, not everything. We are still learning. We are still students. And that is the spirit with which we are here present in this program to try and make sense for you what is happening in one part of the world which is so strategically important for us.
Thank you, sir. General Gautam Moorthy, sir, you might kindly wrap up the whole show and then we'll call Jai Hind.
Okay, I think we've had a most wonderful discussion on what makes Israel fight on, and continue fighting till their goals are achieved. We thank you all, sir. General Atta HASNAIN, thank you very much, sir, for joining us, for sparing a valuable time, and for your comments towards the end, which I guess sums up what we are actually doing we are all in our 70s, and we are just, as General Shankar says, trying to give back, trying to share our own experiences, our own thoughts with participants and with listeners to understand and we, as you said, are still learning. Thank you very much, sir. I'm sorry, our ambassador messaged me that he's got a power outage, and so he has excused himself. But thank him. And above all, I'd like to thank Colonel Peter Lerner for taking his valuable time on his holiday in New York and giving us the Israeli perspective, the Israeli insight to understand exactly what makes Israel tick and what is likely to happen going forth. Thank you, General Shankar, for hosting us and for moderating this wonderful discussion. And above all, thank all the participants who have spared their time to listen in onto this discussion. And I'm sure with the YouTube recording, we will get some more people who will be listening to it on their morning walks, their drives to the office, and their commutes. I know your channel is very popular, and so we will be looking forward to more of that. Thank you all very much. And once again, thank you, Colonel Lerner. Goodbye. Jai Hind. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom, and have a great day, Peter.
Have a great day. Peter, you're on mute.